Ingvar. How you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Pretty hungry now after the, the day.
Yes, I mean it's the first time that I've spoken about cellular agriculture just after watching somebody cook veal milanese, and I hope in the future we will have a better and more sustainable way of making these incredibly delicious dishes. But yeah, thank you so
Exactly.
much for having me.
Exactly. So, James, I'm going to let you take over from now, and we are really looking forward to this panel. And I'll let you take it away. So, thank you both for being here.
Great. Well, I'm just talking now to make sure that everybody can hear me, and hopefully if somebody can hear me, they would say something. I do want to say, like, every panel moderator or like conference organizer knows that like the panel that you put right after lunch is typically a really tough spot, right? Because the panel, the audience, maybe they're kind of staggering back from lunch, their energy's down a little bit because they've just digested a great meal. Now, what Gabriel has done is put us right after the kind of lunch slot where someone has been making a delicious meal, but nobody could eat it. And so now we've got even worse problems because the audience is hungry and furious. And so, you know, Ingvar, we've got our work cut out for us, but I'm really excited to be with you today.
We do.
So let me just introduce myself. I'm James Kotecki. By day, I am the head of marketing at a machine learning company, but I do a lot of interviews with tech leaders and innovators, which is why Gabriel asked me to be here today and speak to Ingvar. Ingvar Helgason is the co-founder and CEO of VitroLabs, bio-grown leather. We're going to get into all of that. Ingvar, welcome. Thanks very much for chatting with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to this conversation.
All right, so let's just dive right into it, and hopefully we can get audience questions either throughout the presentation or maybe at the end. Let's open up my chat box here to see if anything comes our way. But I want to start, when we're talking about, you know, disrupting an industry, it's probably a good idea just to snapshot what the current industry looks like. So take your technology out of it. Can you just snapshot for us the size, the scope of what leather looks like today?
Yeah, I mean, leather is a global industry. It's a material that has been used by humanity for over 400,000 years. So it's quite an enduring material, and it's amazing that we're still using something today that we've used throughout humanity. So the success of leather comes from its properties. It's durable. It has a very visceral and lovely touch to it. It can be made into pretty much anything. So of course it's used across not just in fashion or accessories or the wallets or the watch straps that we all have, but it's also in interiors, in cars, in aviation, in automotive, and yeah, it's a global industry that spans every single product that we might interact with, and even in technology, phone cases, etc. So it's because of its success that it's really become this problem that it is. So if we look at how the leather industry, where we get our leathers from, of course, the main source of leathers is bovine leathers or cow leathers. This is well, some people say it's a byproduct of the meat industry. When you look at the value chain, I would say it's more of a co-product because again, per hide, it's from an animal, it can be between 3 and 10% of the value of the cow can be its hide. So again, it's not an inconsequential amount when you look at a global industry that is worth hundreds of billions of dollars or in trillions when you're looking at meat. So the industry itself hasn't changed a great deal over the last centuries. We've found ways to tan our leathers and prepare them and finish them to a certain degree that where we can make all these beloved products. But because of the supply chain, and I mean industrial agriculture, animal agriculture is responsible for around 18% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So again, it is an industry that we need to look at, and we need to look at how it can be changed. So of course, you know, when we do look at sourcing our leathers, we have to kind of think about the entire impact of the industry and not just look at it as a byproduct of another industry.
And hopefully this isn't too much of a counterpart to what we just, you know, to a delicious lunch demonstration. But like, how many cows have to die to get a leather jacket, for example? Like, can you get multiple jackets from one cow, or does it take multiple cows to make a jacket? Like, I really don't know.
Yes, I mean you have a cow. It's around 52 square feet of leather that comes from one cow, but
Wow.
but again, you can only use part of it because if you look at and this is going to sound quite gruesome, but you have, of course, a three-dimensional animal, and you have to remove the hide from the animal when you slaughter it, and then you have to flatten it out. So again, when you're looking at making high-quality products, it's usually the product of a few different cows that get combined into one product, because again, you can only use a certain aspect of the cow. Now, the supply chain for animals, specifically when it comes to cows, I mean, if you look at what Italian leathers are sold as, the Italian leathers are leathers that are tanned in Italy, but it doesn't mean that the animal was reared in Italy. So it can be a cow that comes from Brazil or industrial agriculture in the US or everywhere, kind of anywhere in the world. So you have to kind of, it is a, traceability in this industry is a huge problem, and the supply chain is a huge problem. So this is something that we're looking to solve here at VitroLabs.
All right, so let's get into it. So that's the current state of the industry. That's the old way. Tell us about the new way. The theory is that you can grow leather, real leather, not some kind of alternative, but real leather in a laboratory environment with a biopsy from a cow, effectively.
Yeah, so I mean, we have to think about the industry still as a whole. I mean, we have to, when we look at kind of the big meatpacking companies, Cargill in the US, for example, it's their revenues are $114 billion a year. It's a very small margin business. I mean, their net income is 3 billion a year. So still big numbers, but again, it's less than 3% of their revenue that they have in profit. So these companies have started investing in cellular agriculture and in plant-based meat. So again, we applaud the industry, what brands are doing today in terms of looking at, they're looking at animal welfare as one of the key points that they're trying to improve on. But again, when we look at the future of the industry, we see it changing from animals to new technologies. In the food, it's plant-based, and in the future, cellular agriculture. And this is where we see the opportunity and the importance of VitroLabs coming in. So there is going to be a smaller supply of high-quality hides in the future. This is already happening. Hermes has been very vocal about this publicly, speaking about the quality of hides that has been decreasing over the last 10 to 15 years. So so at VitroLabs, what we're doing is we're creating.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's an important point. So you're saying that even if people didn't care about where their leather came from, just the raw economics or some other shifts in how meat is produced and consumed generally has a subsequent impact on the leather market, and so there's a decline in quality over time that people have.
Absolutely. So because when you're a farmer, you're optimizing for the output of meat, and when you're optimizing for the output of meat, you cram more animals into smaller enclosures, when you have smaller enclosures, there's more damage to the skin of the animal during its lifetime, and that damage shows itself on the final hide when you, after you slaughter the animal and you tan the hides and finish them. So every single scratch shows up on the finished hide. So even today, when you're optimizing for the output of meat, that leads to a decreased quality of hides.
Okay. So I'm sorry I interrupted you there, but so continue. I think you're talking about how your technology actually works. I think is where you were going to.
Yes, I mean, there's so many issues in this industry, and there's so many different facets that one can look at. I mean, it's a quality, it's price, it's the ethics of it, and then it's the environment. So again, you can try to optimize for a few of those, but it's hard to really capture all of those four corners of the rubric when you're looking at bringing a high quality product to market. So we see that cellular agriculture is not just going to be a niche going forward. It's going to be an essential part of the supply chain of the brands of the future, because again, how do you source high quality hides? When you look at leather and leather alternatives have existed in the market since the 60s or the 70s. So again, it's not, the alternatives are nothing new. But the leather market and the kind of the leather itself has such visceral qualities and durability and beauty that has been prized for a long time and will continue being prized. It's a growing market. It's one of the most rapidly growing luxury markets in the industry. So when you're optimizing for all those qualities, we see that cellular agriculture is really the only way that you can have this beloved material, scale it up, doing so efficiently, doing so ethically, doing so sustainably, and then down the line, of course, being able to hit the price points that that brands are expecting when they're buying calf hides.
So maybe can you paint the picture of what it looks like if I were to go into your office or your lab? What am I seeing? Am I seeing, the classic, beakers and little, kind of a chemistry lab from a movie or something like that? Or does it look nothing like what I'm kind of picturing stereotypically of? Am I looking at, sheets of leather being grown in vats or in kind of giant petri dishes? What am I seeing in the lab?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing is you would see our incredibly hardworking team and a group of very, very smart scientists who are working on some very interesting problems and solving some fundamental problems when it comes to the scientific aspects of growing large volumes of cells in a lab. Now, the two main aspects of the production process. There's the upstream processing, which is growing enough cells to be able to seed into our custom-made bioreactors to then grow the hides. So again, the large-scale cell expansion is a challenge on its own, something that we've been working on, and have an amazing team who have experience in the field. And then the downstream processing, which is seeding the cells into our custom-made bioreactors where we grow the hides. And the good thing about our process is that we let nature take its course. So again, there's the big, what is it called? There's the big kind of debate about natural versus traditional. And our process is natural. We're giving the cells the environment that they need to grow into a full thickness animal hide, but just without the rest of the animal. So again, it is a natural process. Now, the traditional thing is what, of course, farmers would like to show you, the pictures of green fields and happy animals, which is pretty far from the truth, but that's another conversation. So we give the cells the environment to grow into a real animal hide, a real calf hide. And then we harvest those hides from our reactors, and then they go straight into tanning. So again, there's no further processing or maturation or tweaking that has to be done to those hides. They can be used and tanned and finished like a traditional calf hide. So what you would see coming into our labs would be vats where we have cells growing, and then what you would see is the kind of the downstream processing side are custom-made incubators where we have sheets of hides growing to full maturation before they then get harvested and taken into tanning. And
so can you kind of tell me some benchmarks for where the technology is right now? Can you make a leather wallet right now? Can you grow, a square inch of leather? Can you grow how many square meters? Like, give me a sense of where you are now and kind of where you're going to be in the visible future.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a saying that, and there was a study done that on average, a person has between 3 and 4 pieces of leather on them at any given moment. Right now, I have 3 pieces of leather on me, and I can happily tell you that 2 of them are grown in the lab. So I have our Apple Watch strap here, and I do have a wallet here as well. Then this is all grown in the lab. So our process works. We have grown hides, we've tanned them, we've finished them, and we've made them into products. So the big question was always, can they be treated and can they be kind of manipulated as you would a traditional calf hide? And that's something that we've answered in the positive. Yes, this is absolutely a process that is working. We can make real products. We had an artisan in Paris make our card holders and our watch straps, and again, they could work it and treat it just like they would a traditional calf hide.
And then, so you're the CEO of this company, obviously. So what is the current biggest hurdle that you have for kind of where you are now and where you need to go? Is it technology? Is it scale? Is it getting people in the industry to buy into it? What's your next big challenge or current challenge?
So there's a lot of education that has to happen. So again, mainly around kind of what can we change in the industry today? And a lot of that conversation is around animal welfare, but a lot of that conversation leaves out the environmental impact of the animal still being around. So there's a lot of education that has to happen in terms of what today looks like, but what do we have to do to change the future and make that a sustainable future and a future where we can all continue living on this planet and consuming like we have. On the other front, it's of course we're building equipment that has never existed before, so there are engineering challenges, and there is still some challenge around the scientific aspects of it, developing cell lines and bringing down the costs. But a lot of the costs will be brought down with scale. So of course, this is a very new technology that is coming out of the labs just now. So again, there's a lot of industrialization that still has to happen, and of course, still some scientific challenges that our team is working on.
We got a question from Marcel talking about, and everybody, by the way, please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A app, and I'll try to throw as many of them into the mix as I can. Marcel Schwartz talking about this process sounds similar to clean meat, in vitro meat technology. And Marcel is pointing out that clean meat is still taking some time to come to the market, at least. And I think this is an interesting question about perception, because there's been talk about lab-grown leather, lab-grown meat, crazy futuristic food, and kind of animal product alternatives. Now, for some time, is part of what you run into in the marketplace skepticism because it's maybe taken longer than people would have liked to believe based on the hype of the past few years?
I mean, yes, it's definitely a problem that this industry has had. Maybe not a problem because, again, kind of everybody loves talking about what they're doing, and specifically when they're talking about something new and exciting that they're working on. There have been companies in the space that have maybe gone out a little bit too quickly. We've literally only started speaking about what we're doing now. The company is 4.5 years old, but we've decided to keep quiet because, again, we've seen so many people talking about the beautiful future, but then not delivering on it. So again, we've made sure that we know that we can deliver before we started talking, and now we're at that stage where we have products, where we have early stage prototypes of the platform, and are ready to start scaling that up. So yes, it is a problem around people going out and talking a big game without having delivered. When you look at the meat industry versus the leather industry, of course, clean meat companies, they do have to work within regulatory bodies, and there has been a question about how do you regulate a product that has to be consumed. And in the US, at least, I'm less familiar with how it is in Europe, but in Europe and in the US, at least, both the USDA and the FDA have taken an interest in this, and both are going to be regulating it. So the FDA from the cell source and the scientific process, and then the USDA from the final consumer product aspect of it. So yes, there are regulatory hurdles. There's of course entrenched interests that have been maybe not so happy about this change. But then when you look at companies like Cargill, they have actually invested in some of these clean meat companies, and they understand that this is a future that can't be ignored. So again, rather just getting on board with it than trying to ignore it or trying to fight against it. In the leather industry, it's very much about scale. It's about figuring out how does a process come from a lab to first pilot scale, and then manufacturing scale, and then industrial scale. So again, and that has been a huge challenge. So we've seen a number of companies in the space that have pivoted to different types of methods of creating, rather than creating actual leather, creating leather inspired materials, or going plant-based, and various aspects of the kind of targeting different segments of the leather supply chain. We believe that creating a true leather replacement is the way forward, specifically for the segment that we want to target in the luxury space. So again, it is unfortunately, yes, it does take time bringing a new technology to market. I think it's even when you look at the plant-based food space, Impossible Foods, they started selling in 2 restaurants in 2016, one in San Francisco at Jardinier, where I had one of the first burgers. and one in New York. So again, it took them a number of years to actually get to the scale where they could be delivering to supermarkets. So yes, patience is required. Some temperament, some kind of holding back is required from the people that have founded these companies, myself included. But again, we have to show what the future looks like before we can deliver on it.
Now, from a regulatory perspective, I assume you don't actually have to tell consumers anything about where the leather came from if you don't want to. I mean, you probably do from a marketing perspective, because I'm sure people buy this for the ethical and environmental reasons you're talking about. But do you have any legal obligation to tell people that this was grown in a lab?
So there are some countries that have a regulation around what you can call leather and what you can't call leather. That regulation goes back to when kind of vegan leathers were
Pleather and things
brought
like
to market, because again, they're just plastics. So of course, kind of that is a little bit of a misleading statement saying that it's a vegan leather when it's just plastic, but petroleum based. So there are some countries that have regulation around that. Now we haven't. We're looking at where we fall within that, but our hope and our dream is that we can sell this as real leather, because again, it does come from cows. It is real leather. It's just made in a slightly different way and much more sustainable way.
And to that point, we have a question from Sam Snyder. Does the leather have a grain on it, or does it need to be distressed in a way that gives it the wrinkled topography of cowhide?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now our leathers are fairly smooth to the touch. So you can distress it afterwards during the tanning and the finishing process, and there's as well ways of embossing with patterns and things like that. But right now we're quite happy with the look that it has, because again, we would like people to understand that this is not from an animal. So again, we know that a lot of the vegan leathers where they just emboss a grain into the leather to make it kind of look like a generic version of leather. I think there are new ways of showing that these things that our leathers are harmless to animals, and so they do have a different maturation process, and they do have a slightly different finishing process, and we would like that to be one of our selling points.
And when you think about yourselves in a few years, you're dominating the market, hopefully. Do you think the majority of buyers are going to be buying it because they know where it comes from and they're willing to pay a premium for that? Or do you see a play where you're able to actually eventually undercut the more traditional leather and people don't necessarily need to know where it comes from? They just know it's a better quality, maybe lower cost product.
Yeah, so we see this and we have to go back to the supply chain a little bit there. So when you think about how traditional leathers are bought from tanneries, a brand has to buy the entire hide. Then when they receive those hides into their factories or the manufacturers, they have to manually inspect every single hide. They've been kind of bundled together. So you buy maybe 100 hides. You know that like 2% are maybe going to be grade A, 10% are going to be grade B, and then the rest is going to be grade C and below. So you have to kind of buy these bundles. So you can't just say like, I want this one, just this one type of leather. Then you have to manually inspect every single hide, check for defects. You have to mark those defects. Then you have to start cutting around kind of where the high quality parts of the hide are, which are usually at the top back of the animal, where the animal is, like where the back of the animal is. And then you have to discard the kind of lower quality parts of the hide. But of course, you've had to buy the entire hide. So from a partnership perspective, we're offering a much simpler solution to brands. They get the square piece of hide where you can use pretty much the entire part of it. There are going to be no defects guaranteed by us, because again, we grow it to perfection every single time. And then you're going to be reducing the wastage by quite a large amount. So in the luxury industry, up to 40% of a hide can be thrown away during the cutting process. So, but these are prices that the brands have had to pay. And of course, the manual inspection, labor intensive, etc. So when they're looking at the future and what we have to offer, this is really a no-brainer for brands to choose. And then, of course, it comes the story that we can tell the customer that this is, yes, it is good for the environment. it is sustainable, it's ethical, and it's been done in accordance with a very transparent supply chain, because of course we want to show the consumers every single step of the way, and being able to, that's going to be one of the selling points. We don't have to hide any part of the supply chain from our customers.
So you get the best of both worlds in a sense. You get to sell it, maybe you get to offer better economics to suppliers and better ethics and environmental concerns to end users.
Exactly.
Consumers. I want to go to an ethical question that I was wrestling with as I was prepping for this interview. And this may speak to, like, I don't know, the dark primal nature of certain corners of humanity. Is there something, let's say your leather is better all around. It's cheaper, it's higher quality, it's environmentally friendly, it's ethical, all that. Is there some part of the consumer base that just likes the fact that a cow had to die, just to put it bluntly? And do you have a sense of how to quantify that percentage?
So of course, there's always going to be consumers that like that. I mean, there are still people that go big game hunting in Africa. There's or other places in the world, and there are people that are going to be like killing animals, and these are just not going to be our customers, at least in the short to medium term. So so yes, I mean, to answer that question simply, some people like the fact that an animal had to die. We're very fortunate that most people don't think like that, but there's always going to be a subset of the population that likes that.
We're going to follow that question up with a much lighter question from AJ Glassberg, which is actually such a great question. How does it smell? Does your leather smell as good as traditional leather, says AJ? I know some luxury car manufacturers consider things like that.
That's a great question. I can tell a little story. So I'm not going to name any names, but we were at a meeting, myself and my head of product, Francois. We were at a meeting in Europe last year, trying to be as vague as possible, and where we were showing some early prototypes of our leather, and two people in the industry, and this was a person who was high placed within a company, and they are a large consumer of leather, and again, it was an early prototype, so it kind of didn't look 100% as good as our products look now, but so he held it in his hands during our conversation, and was kind of touching it and feeling it, and we were discussing what the future looks like for VitroLabs and how we see this impacting the industry. And during the time when he was holding it, he said, he kind of nodded his head and said, "This is some work that still needs to be done on the material itself, on the touch and feel." And then maybe 15 minutes into the conversation, he puts the leather up to his nose and he takes a few deep breaths and closes his eyes, and then he opens his eyes and looks at us and says, leather. So yes, smell is very important. It's something that we can deliver on, and it is something that we are very aware of, because it is one of the very important senses that when it comes to the leather goods that we are producing. It's the touch, it's the look, and of course it is the smell that we all love about leather.
I think that executive accidentally wrote some ad copy for you that you can use on your site, advertisements on the web. Speaking of your site, I found this, well, actually you sent me kind of a mission statement of sorts that you have published on Medium, and I don't know if we can send a link to attendees or something, but folks can go on Medium and look up your name and find this. It's kind of a mission statement of philosophy about the company. And this was an interesting passage that I want to get your commentary on. You said, "We understand that our technology, like so many others, has the potential to have negative consequences if we make the wrong decisions on how we use it." What kind of negative consequences worry you the most?
So, I mean, it's of course, when we're talking about biotechnology, there are nefarious uses of biotechnology, and there is a way of imagining a dystopian future where biotechnology is used for bad purposes. So again, any technology that is developed, it's a tool. It can be used for good, it can be used for bad, and then, I mean, in the more dystopian futures, when we're talking about, I mean, what is going to be grown in a lab versus what is going to be reared naturally. There are kind of scenarios one can imagine we've all seen Blade Runner. I have to, and actually Blade Runner was, I shouldn't say this, but Blade Runner was one of the inspirations behind VitroLabs, and so that is a pretty dystopian view of what technology.
In the sense of the robots that they made in that film?
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't go that far that saying that our technology can be used to make androids just yet, but one can imagine that
somebody save that clip and we'll play it back in 20 years and we'll see where we are.
I think our technical team would be quite disappointed with me if I told them that we would have to start making androids tomorrow.
Yeah. But I have to say, maybe to speak in your defense or on your behalf, it seems like what you are giving an alternative to is something that is so terrible and so bleak. You know, when we did a pre-interview for this conversation, you mentioned a lot of times it's actually illegal to actually know what goes on inside factory farms, because if you ever caught a glimpse of it, it's so horrific, right? And many of us and most of us participate in that to a certain degree, but we don't want to know what goes on there. So as crazy and as weird as biotech, lab grown, whatever could get, it still probably wouldn't be as bad as the way that we cram animals into situations now.
No. So, I mean, there are a number of states here in the US where it's illegal. It's a criminal offense to film inside slaughterhouses. Now, of course, these laws were implemented because, again, it's in some people's interest not to have an insight into what actually goes on within these companies. Then, I mean, other figures such as, I think it's 96% of people that work in slaughterhouses have some form of PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder, because again, it is just, I mean, these are living animals that we're working with, and seeing them going from the animals that live on fields to the little packagings that we have in supermarket. Yes, it's intentionally become a black box that we're not informed of. There's, of course, ways of finding that out. I mean, there are plenty of articles that have been published online. There are videos that have been snuck out of these slaughterhouses. Now, I don't recommend necessarily that people kind of start Googling or start looking on YouTube for these videos, because they are quite traumatic. But it is definitely good to at least be aware of the fact that there is a process that is being hidden from us. There is a process that is being intentionally glossed over, because again, you can have animal welfare and taking care of that, but usually that happens within the first living stages of the animal. So again, not the insemination, the artificial insemination, and not the slaughter, but like there's the visible part that has been focused on. So yes, the industry is gruesome, but it is good to see that brands, even today, they are really understanding that things have to be done in a better way. They have to be done in a more ethical way, and they're really working within with the tools that they have currently. So again, they within the system that we have now. I wish that we could have industrial scale lab grown leather manufacturing up and running tomorrow. But again, from a technical perspective, that's just not possible. So again, there is going to be a time between now and when this is going to be, our products are going to be widely available to the market, where there is going to be, unfortunately, we have to work within the current system, and then making that system as good and ethical and sustainable as possible is important.
I want to go to two questions from Anastasia, which may be somewhat related. One question is, are you planning to start your own fashion line with your biomade leather? And I guess maybe the part of that question is, are you going to just be a supplier, or do you want to start your own fashion line? We know you have, actually, we didn't talk about this, but you have a background in the fashion industry. It's fairly extensive. And the other question is, how expensive is this going to be? Maybe, so I guess if you or someone else does come out with a biomade leather fashion line, what can we expect pricing to be on that relative to other similar, more traditional leather?
Yeah, so great questions, both of them. So the first question, we want to start off being a supplier, because again, we see the biggest impact, rather than at least in the beginning, rather than making more product for an industry where there is already a lot of product out there. We want to fix the products that are already being made and marketed. So, and as well, having a partner within the luxury industry that has validated the quality that has validated the interest and has validated the positive impact that this can have on the world. That's something that is very important to us, again, because we want the industry buy-in. We don't want to just we don't want to kind of sideline the industry that is going to be our biggest partner. Now, whether we want to start our own fashion line, it's not something that we're looking at right now. We want to take that partnership approach with the industry. What happens in the future, time will tell, but right now we're focused on industry partnerships. Now, from the price point, of course, anything that comes out of an R&D process, it starts off as expensive. Even today, when you look at some of the more mature products, for example, plant-based meats, Impossible Foods, Beyond Meat, they sell in supermarkets at around 4x the price of what you would be able to buy, for example, a kind of traditional animal meat from. So again, there is always going to be an initial price to pay. Unfortunately, I wish that we as well could kind of bring the costs down from day one, but there is always going to be that price curve that we're working within while the industry is maturing, while we're scaling up to production, because again, a lot of our efficiencies will come with scale. So again, the reason why we're targeting the luxury industry in the beginning, because again, they have the most price flexibility. They're used to paying a premium for high quality products. So being able to deliver to that industry, making them happy, and delivering the quality that they're looking for, will allow us to scale up and start delivering to other more accessible industries down the line.
Do you have a sense of timing? Is this going to take years? Is this going to take decades to get where you want to go? Do you have a sense of this being kind of your life mission? Because there's obviously so many great, mission-oriented aspects that you could have around this. Are you in this for decades? Obviously, you want it to go as quickly as you can, but changing something this pervasive, something that, as you mentioned, we've been using for thousands of years, that's obviously going to take some time. So what's your time horizon? What's your sense of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we are building out the infrastructure right now. So I mean, of course, I would love to launch this again tomorrow if possible, but there are a number of engineering and scientific challenges that we're working on. Now we're going to be building out the infrastructure to do this at least a small scale over the next 12 months, and then we're going to be ramping up production and delivering to our first customer within the next few quarters after that. So this is, I mean, very near term, I would say, very near term when we're looking at the kind of time scales of leather. Then it's like a quarter to delivery. But when we're looking at human time scales, yeah, we're looking at building out the infrastructure over the next 12 to 16 months, and then ramping up production.
Makes sense. So we're coming to a close here in our conversation, although I do want to make sure that anybody else who has Q&A, feel free to type that into the Q&A box. We've covered a lot, and I appreciate it. And I want to know, my last question to you is, has this changed you? How has this process of founding and running this company changed you as far as how you see the world, how you consume, etc.?
Profoundly. It has. I worked in the fashion industry for 10 years before. Well, I had my own brand for 10 years, but I worked in the fashion industry for probably closer to 20 years before founding VitroLabs. And I was aware of sustainability, and I really do commend initiatives such as Copenhagen Fashion Forum, I think they're called, and a number of other initiatives that have launched with the mission of introducing sustainability into the fashion supply chain. These groups started, I mean, back in 2010, 2011. So again, they're quite early on, but I'm so happy to have seen the conversation around sustainability, around ethical consumption, and really about supply chain transparency ramping up over the last 12 months. And after COVID, even, I mean, it's become even more clear that we need to change our ways, both in consuming, in transparency, and in fair working conditions. So for me to be able to work on these problems on a daily basis, to be able to be educated, to be able to learn about the different aspects of the industry, it's changed my life profoundly. And I mean, I try not to be too annoying at well, it used to be dinner parties and now on Zoom calls about kind of evangelizing and telling people that kind of how their consumption impacts the environment. But yes, I have become much more vocal about what needs to happen.
Well, not only have you not annoyed me, you fascinated me, and I'm sure the rest of the audience at Tectalia thinks the same. So Ingvar Helgason, CEO and co-founder of VitroLabs, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate the conversation. I know everybody has been DMing me, texting me, saying that this was a fascinating conversation, including my mother. She said that she can't wait until she can buy her new.
I love unbiased opinions.
Yes, exactly. But she is a fashionista and loves her leather brand. So I'm pretty sure we can figure something out. But thank you, James, for hosting the panel, and Ingvar, thank you so much, and excited to see how everything plays out over the next couple of years.
Thank you so much. Thank you, James. Thank you, Gabriel.
Cheers.